my sharing getting in the way of yours?
I can see Sarah's
You can
slide.
see mine?
I can't. I'm going to stop sharing and hope that doesn't. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, looking good?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Sorry, I was just getting set up. I do have a number of web links that I'm going to share, but it looks like I might just wait and share those all at the end. A number of different um, websites about the program, things that you all might be interested. So I'll just do a big blast of those when I'm done presenting, because I've got my whole screen taken up with the PowerPoint right now. But anyway, thank you all so much, Jane. That was a really beautiful introduction and really lovely service. So I'm so happy to be here with you all this morning. It was funny as you were reading my little bio, I thought, I still need to do today's New York Times Sunday crossword, since you reminded me how much I like those. But I'm here to talk about the Community Education Project, Stetson's higher education and prison program. So I'll start with a little bit of a history of the program and some information about my involvement. And then specifically, I'll get into some details about our garden project, which is under the umbrella of the Community Education Project, which, as you heard from my introduction, is certainly where my primary interest and passion comes from. So a little bit of the history, a show of hands, who was here years ago for the original visit from CEP, who learned about the program? Okay, so some just a review and refresher for some of you all, but I have been involved with the program since 2018, which is when I started at Stetson. But the program itself began in 2015. So, in the early days of the Community Education Project, or CEP as we call it, it was just a small reading group that was led by a few faculty from Stetson who had been involved in higher education in prison when they were in grad school. So, they came to Stetson, started their faculty careers, and really wanted to start a higher education in prison project here in Central Florida. And Tomoka Correctional Institution really just was the closest prison. And so that was the prison that they started working with. And so for those first years, it was small reading groups, it was non-credit bearing workshops. There was some loose connections, obviously, to Stetson because the faculty were housed at Stetson, but it wasn't an official credit-bearing Stetson program, and it was completely self-funded. And then over the years, the project really expanded with the receipt of several large grants. And then the big change was when the program was able to start offering credit bearing courses. So that started 2018, 2019. And ever since then, our students that are enrolled at Tomoka in CEP, they receive credit, college credit for Stetson classes that are the same classes that we teach on the main campus. So that's something that we're incredibly proud of. The credits are donated by Stetson, which is the one way that Stetson funds the program is in the donation of those credits. But other than that, we're completely funded by grants and external donations. And then we faculty are able to use our time at Stetson to teach these classes at Tomoka. So, for example, in the fall, I taught a class that was in my course load at Stetson, but I taught it at the prison. So all of our students, we usually have a cohort of about 20 students at a time. They all meet Stetson's requirements for admission. We have a slightly different application process because they're not able to take things like the ACT or the SAT, but they all have to have a GED or a high school diploma. So in all of the meaningful ways, our students at the prison are the same as our students on campus. And that's something that we really emphasize in the program and in our communication about the program to the wider community, that we really want to eliminate to the best of our ability this distinction between Stetson student and person in prison. We don't call our students inmates. We don't call them prisoners. We use what we call humanizing language. So we refer to them as maybe a person who is incarcerated, or most importantly, a student. And so we really want to remind people that these folks who are incarcerated in prison are still part of our larger community. We are still responsible for them the way that we are responsible for other people in our community. And that's part of why the name Community Education Project was chosen, to really re-emphasize that, yes, we operate in a prison, but this is not about the prison. This is about the people there and about the members of our broader community. We don't take Stetson students to the prison. There are some higher education and prison programs that are called an inside out model, where students from the main campus come and learn alongside people who are incarcerated. That's not our model. We recently got the ability to use Zoom at the prison. We don't have internet, but now we have a monitor that has Zoom capabilities. So in the future, we might be able to do some guest lectures and things that are more collaborative. But that is our current model, where we have Stetson faculty who come to the prison and teach their classes in our dedicated prison classroom. So this picture right here is from probably 6 years ago. So the classroom looks very different now than it does in this photo, but this is the same classroom space. So we have a dedicated classroom in the library on the compound at the prison. That is our space. We don't share it with anybody else. We call it Hatter Hall, or kind of our Stetson satellite campus. And so that's where we have all of our classes. And over the last couple of years, we have changed out all of the seating. So there's tables now, chairs. We have a full computer lab. Even though we don't have internet, the students now have access to computers and laptops for them to do all of their assignments on. We have a pretty big library of CEP books, some of which I think were donated by you all years ago. So we've been collecting books over the years, and it's really expanded to be a pretty professional space. We've got a projector where we can do PowerPoints, we can screen documentaries, things like that, all for class. So that's a really big accomplishment that we have had since, again, those early days of the reading group. So our current, oh, let me see, something's going. I tell you, I've been doing Zoom since the pandemic, and it's still a trial and error. Let me reshare. So this is our current mission statement. We've gone through some changes over the years, reevaluating our mission and our real focus, but this is what we currently strive to do. So the Community Education Project at Stetson University offers comprehensive liberal arts education within Florida's prison system. We work with students to facilitate personal and intellectual development and contribute to the enrichment of our communities. So again, this idea that they are all part of the same community as the rest of us. These classes are transferable. So there was a little bit of conversation before we started about, taking these credits to other places. So we have some students who get out of prison and they enroll at Daytona State, or they enroll at other universities. We run up against a challenge in that a lot of universities ask about criminal history, or if students have a record when they apply. So we're always kind of supporting students through that if they want to continue their education after they are released from prison. And so with the growth of solely online programs, that's been a big help to our students, because they might not be able to attend classes in person due to restrictions on a campus, but they can participate in an online degree program. And then another thing that's really special about our program that I'm very proud of is we don't discriminate based on length of sentence. So in the state of Florida, there are a handful of college and prison programs that offer college courses like ours, but many educational programs in the Department of Corrections are not available to people with a life sentence. And that is something that we feel very strongly about. We feel that education is a right for everybody, no matter the length of sentence. And so we do have a number of students in our program who theoretically could be in our program indefinitely because they have a life sentence, and that's something that we push back against when the administration at the prison asks us to, maybe focus on admitting students with a shorter sentence, and we say no, we want this to be open to everyone. We only have space for about 20 to 25 students at a time, but we will have 60 plus applicants each time we do admission. So part of our goals, I have a slide at the end about some future goals for the program, and we are always thinking about expansion. We would love to be able to offer more classes in the future and have even more space. So in addition to the credit-bearing courses, we have about 1 or 2 courses at a time. So I taught a course this past fall on food studies, which is one of the courses that I teach every semester on the main campus. They had an anthropology course this past spring with a focus on genealogy. So the students did research on their own family histories and came up with these incredible family trees, which was really remarkable. And then this summer, starting in late June, they will have a religious studies course. That will be their credit-bearing course. In the fall, they'll take a Spanish course that will be 1 semester. They'll take the 2nd semester in the spring. So we're also trying to plan out a curriculum into the future as well as we can. We like to focus on things that are general education requirements so they can easily transfer to other institutions. But sometimes it just comes down to which faculty is able to get away from the main campus for a while and teach a class at the prison. We've had 2 in-house publications so far, 2 anthologies of student work. I'll share links to those at the end of my presentation in case you're interested in checking out those books. Students have also, for many years, been involved in a public history project, diving into archival research about the plantation that became De Leon Springs State Park. So I have an article about that I'll share too. The students really amassed a historical archive in the prison classroom that allowed them to do really incredible historical research, pushing back against this idea that is prominent when you go to De Leon Springs State Park, that the names of the enslaved people there are lost to history, or there's really no way to know who lived there or what happened. And the students were really bothered by that idea. And so they took this on under the guidance of a former faculty member who was a historian, and have written about this. We also, in recent years, have branched into some reentry services, so supporting people after they get out of prison, supporting our students specifically, but then also we published a guide, a reentry guide that we're trying to make available to the entire state. So helping people get access to services once they are released from prison, even things like how to get a driver's license, how to, use the internet. Some people have been incarcerated for decades and went to prison before the internet was ubiquitous, before smartphones, and then get released and are really starting from scratch. So that's a newer part of our program. We have a faculty member who oversees several student interns who help with the reentry services. We also have some scholarship programs where we try to support our students upon release with either basic cost of living or educational expenses. And then the big thing that I wanted to talk to you all about, my preamble here was quite long. There's just so much going on with the program at all times, but is the community garden. So as you heard from Jane's introduction, my background is in garden-based education. I love gardening. I love plants. I love gardens as an educational tool. Most of my experience before Stetson was with elementary school gardens, and I still help oversee some small grant programs at local elementary schools here in Volusia County to encourage those teachers to garden with their students. But about 5 years ago, we were able to bring all of that to Tomoka. One other note here, it's really, really very hard to get photos in the prison. We're not allowed to bring cameras in. We're not allowed to bring our phones in. So I only have a few photos in the slideshow, and they're all times that the warden brought a camera in to take pictures for us. So you'll have to use some imagination to kind of fill in the blanks on what we're seeing. But the photos that we do have are precious because we don't have very many of them. So a little bit of backstory on the community garden specifically. In the summer of 2019, I taught my first full credit-bearing course at the prison, which was my Introduction to Food Studies class. This is an introduction to the whole food system. I teach it on Stetson's campus every semester. It's the introduction to our sustainable food systems minor. And so I taught this to the students at the prison that summer. And at the end of this class, we always end with a conversation about what do we do with all of this information? We've spent this whole class learning about the problems in the food system, learning about hunger and food insecurity and the environmental impact of the way we grow food and all of these really big, big problems. But then we end the class by learning about food as a tool for activism and learning about people who are using food and gardens and farms to really try and make the world a better place. And so when I have this conversation with students on the main campus, it's like, what are you going to do after this class? Are you going to volunteer at a nonprofit? Are you going to pursue this for a career? Are you going to buy organic? Are you going to shop local, go to the farmer's market, volunteer at a farm? Well, that conversation is very, very different when you're having it in prison with this population of people who are quite disempowered in many ways. They don't have much control over their food. The food quality in prison is extremely low. They don't have the ability to like vote with their fork or vote with their food dollars the way a lot of people talk about. And so we just started having this conversation like, what can we do in the prison? And the idea kept coming up over and over again that we should really grow some food here for ourselves. And so I wrote a small proposal for the warden to have some like hydroponic, a grow tower to grow some lettuce or something in the classroom. That was shut down immediately. Everything just kind of got shut down every time we talked about even having like a single pot with a pepper plant or something. But then the pandemic happened and we had to leave the prison for almost a year. We didn't do any in-person teaching. We shifted to just a print newsletter with some educational content that we would mail to students every month. But during that time, we were able to really think about this community garden idea. And we started talking as a team about what would it look like to be able to grow a garden, have an outdoor meeting space for our classes that could be safe in the pandemic, and then also meet this goal of growing food, having students being involved in like this food activism work. And so we wrote a really large grant, and we got the grant from the Mellon Foundation. So one of the links I'll share with you is a short news article about when we first received the grant. It was almost $400,000 from the Mellon Foundation, which was unheard of in our history of getting grants in the program. We had gotten smaller grants to help fund staff, but this one was a real game changer. So not only did it allow us to build the garden itself, which takes up a huge footprint. I think it's about 10,000 square feet, fenced in off of the library building where our classroom is. But most importantly, even more importantly than the space and the materials that we were able to buy with the grant, we were able to hire a full-time staff person. So we hired Rick Wheatley, who was our garden manager, and has now been promoted to our on-site program manager. So he now oversees all of the on-site programs at CEP. But if you know anything about gardening or farming, it's so time and labor intensive, and we just couldn't have done this without a dedicated staff person. So he started in early 2021, and his charge was figure out how to build a garden in this place. We have all of this money that we need to spend on this. The students have asked for this. And so he came up with some really, like, he designed these garden beds that don't use any metal because we're not allowed to use screws or nails because they could be used as a weapon in the prison. So he figured out how to work within the requirements of the prison in terms of safety, and really get our vision to come to life. Since we built the garden, I've been able to teach 3 more of my core credit-bearing courses out there, which I wouldn't have been able to teach before because they require this hands-on learning and gardening experience. So the students have now had a full suite of sustainable food systems courses. I've had one student publish a journal article since then, which I'll also share with you all. And students have presented in my discipline's annual conference. Most years, they'll put together conference proposals and either will get permission to film them reading their paper, their conference paper, or I will read them at the conference on their behalf. I have brought in a number of guest lectures connected to the garden. So several local farmers have come and spoken to the students. A woman who leads a food access nonprofit in Gainesville came and spoke to them, and a number of other people who are connected to the food world who come in and they present on their own work, which for me, I always think of as like a reverse field trip. I can't take the students to these farms, but I can bring the farms to them. We also have done some seed exchanges where our students in the prison will collect seeds from certain varieties that they're cultivating, and then we'll donate those to gardens on the outside or vice versa. So that's a really neat way to kind of bridge the prison walls through gardening, that I think is really beautiful. The garden is incredible. The way that the students maintain it, the productivity that they're able to get, the research that they put into managing every plot. I mean, every time I'm out at the prison, there's just some new project that they're experimenting with, and they are able to grow really incredible things that if we didn't have the resources and just the time that they're able to spend in the garden, it doesn't look like my garden, and it certainly doesn't look like our garden on campus. But it's really beautiful to see. And the students will also talk about it being kind of an oasis in the middle of the prison compound. So prison is an incredibly stressful, ugly, violent place. And the garden is not that. It's a place of nurturing and beauty. And there's hummingbirds that come visit the plants, there's pollinators, there's flowers. I mean, it's really a sanctuary. I've recently partnered with a couple folks who are counselors in DeLand, and they have a garden on the site of their office. And so they're interested in partnering through this kind of mental health angle. The students are really interested in having some mental health programming that is connected to the garden. So it's really flourished into an incredible thing. Again, we've got some additional community partnerships. And then this book was the second book that we have published. This is published through Burrow Press, which is a small press that Stetson acquired several years ago. And so it's all student writing, kind of connected to the theme of the garden. So I'll share the link for that too. This was a picture on the day that we started installing the garden beds. So you can see what they look like. We have about 10 of these really large raised beds that again are built without any hardware. So that was just an incredible design on Rick's part. If you're standing where the photographer is standing in this picture, you've got your back to the library where our classroom is. So that gives you kind of a sense of the orientation of this. On the left-hand side of the photo is the chapel, and then there's some other administrative buildings. So now currently we've got these beds, but then there's also the entire area is planted with in-ground beds. So there's no longer any grass. And one concession that we had to make to get approval for the garden was we had to put up fencing with barbed wire around the entire perimeter, which we really struggled with because we didn't want to be paying money to build more prison infrastructure. That's kind of a hard line for us, but they wouldn't allow us to build the garden just open, even though this is all within the fenced barbed wire confines of the prison. So this was on the installation day, filled these great big beds up with soil. And there you can see some of the first planting. This person on the left watering, we call him Doc. He is the one who published the peer-reviewed journal article that I'll share with you all. He's not in the program anymore. Unfortunately, he was transferred to a different institution, but he's an absolutely brilliant guy, and I really loved getting to work with him. And then here again, low quality photos from the warden, but these are more recent photos. So this is from 2023. It's grown and flourished and expanded even since then, but this is kind of looking the other direction. So the building that we're facing here is the library. And so all of this within this fence is the new since 2021 garden. So they have all in-ground beds here. And then you can see some of the raised beds over to the right. This extends about half as far again behind us. They have a pollinator area that is always planted in native pollinator crops. And then in the raised beds and in the in-ground beds, they're always rotating through melons, beans, herbs, greens, kale, okra, tomatoes. I mean, onions, really anything you can think of. There are some interesting restrictions that we've run into over the years. There's been a lot of trial and error as we've figured out how to do this work within the confines of the prison. Again, anything that could be used as a weapon. So we can't grow hot peppers. And then anything that could explicitly be used to make alcohol. So sugarcane, we were growing sugarcane for a class to illustrate. It was a class on Latin American studies, and so we were gonna, grow sugarcane to connect this, and we had to take that out. So some of the rule, they often feel pretty arbitrary, but we do our best to play nice with the administration. They have overall been incredibly supportive of the program. It benefits all of us to have this be supported and be doing well. And the students over the years have just completely taken ownership over this. We also always want to make sure that it's optional, that no one is ever required to participate in the garden. There is a long and pretty ugly history of prison farms in Florida and in the South, and we're very careful to not be reproducing that. So we want to make sure that everybody knows that they can opt out at any time, that they can participate to the way that they are able. They have weekly meetings to talk about the state of the garden, to talk about what they're planning, to talk about pests and any issues. And so it's really been amazing to watch them grow into leaders in this program over the last couple of years. There's a slightly different angle. You can see a few more of the raised beds. In the last couple of months, they have started to make a paved path with broken pieces of concrete that were relocated from another part of the compound. So real ingenuity. So from the door there's now a paver path, but it is these broken pieces of concrete. They are growing strawberries right now, potatoes. There's a large area for composting over on the side. And we have irrigation too. So they do hand water things, but then we're also able to run irrigation lines. So it's a really impressive setup. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about before I'll have some time for questions. In the last month, actually, I've had 2 articles come out based on my work in the garden. So here's the abstract for one that was published in Agriculture and Human Values, a journal in my field. And then I have another one that was published in a journal called Outlook on Agriculture. I've got the abstract for that on the next page, but I can read this one and I'll share these with you too if you're interested. The United States prison system and food system are both expansive and connected through shared histories of racial capitalism and human and environmental exploitation. This article reports on a qualitative case study of a sustainable food systems course taught in a Southern prison in which incarcerated students engage in gardening and food systems work. The study explores the potential for incarcerated individuals to contribute to food justice efforts, even within the constraints of the prison environment and despite their exclusion from formal democratic processes. The findings highlight challenges and tensions within the prison garden, including racial dynamics and administrative interference, which mirror challenges within the broader food system. The research suggests that while prison gardens and food systems education programs may benefit incarcerated individuals, universal food justice cannot be achieved without dismantling the underlying systems of oppression that make the prison industrial complex possible. And then this second article here is a shorter one, and it was really investigating this idea that we as educators know so much more than our students, and that's something that I have really changed my thinking on over the years, working with these incredibly clever and creative students in the prison. And so this is kind of contributing to that conversation about food systems education. And that is all I have. So again.